I still remember the exact moment I realized my family never actually saw me as a son. Not when my mother slid the leather bill folder across the table. Not when my sister smirked into her champagne glass like the entire thing was funny. Not even when my uncle leaned back in his chair and said, "Come on, Evan, don't make this awkward in front of Derek's family." No, it was the silence that did it. That horrible, heavy silence where everybody avoided eye contact because they already knew what was happening. Everybody except me. I sat there staring at the black leather folder in front of me while waiters moved around carrying expensive wine and plated desserts. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had never actually been invited anywhere because they wanted me there. I was invited because they expected something from me. Money. My name's Evan. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 months ago, I genuinely believed sacrificing yourself for family was what good sons were supposed to do. Turns out there's a very thin line between being supportive and being used, and I didn't notice I'd crossed that line years ago. The rehearsal dinner was held at this upscale Italian restaurant downtown called Bella Rosa. Private room. Marble floors, fancy lighting. The kind of place where nobody even looks at the prices because everyone there pretends they're richer than they actually are. Which described my family perfectly, especially my younger sister Qley. Qley had been the center of the universe since the day she was born. My mom used to tell this story constantly about how the nurses said Qley was the prettiest baby in the nursery, and somehow that became her entire personality growing up. Everything revolved around her. Her dance recitals, her birthdays, her emotions, her dreams, and honestly, I didn't resent her for it when we were younger, at least not at first. I was the dependable kid, the quiet one, the one teachers loved because I never caused problems. The one who got a part-time job at 16 because mom said money was tight. The one who helped pay the electric bill at 19 while Qley spent hundreds on concert tickets and acrylic nails. I became useful early, and once families realize you're useful, they rarely let you stop being useful, especially when you start making decent money. By my late 20s, I owned a small but successful software consulting company with 2 friends from college. Nothing flashy but enough that I lived comfortably. Apparently, comfortably meant available for financial extraction in my family. Mom's car repairs. "Evan, can you help just this once?" Qley overdrafting her account. She's stressed with wedding planning. Uncle Gary behind on rent. You know how hard things have been for him. And every single time I helped, they acted grateful for about 12 minutes before it became expected again. That's the part nobody warns you about. The second people start depending on your kindness, they stop seeing it as kindness. It becomes obligation. By the time Qley got engaged to Derek, I was basically the unofficial emergency fund for the entire family. And Derek's family made everything worse. They were polished, wealthy adjacent, obsessed with appearances. His parents belonged to country clubs. His sister had one of those Pinterest-perfect homes where even the lemons in the kitchen looked professionally arranged. The second mom met them, she became desperate to compete. Suddenly everything had to be elegant. Expensive venue, custom invitations, designer dress, imported flowers. Meanwhile, Qley quit her job to focus on wedding stress. I wish I were joking. The entire engagement period felt like watching people build a mansion out of cardboard while pretending it was marble. And somehow, every conversation kept drifting toward me. "You're doing well now? You don't even have kids yet. Family helps family." I should have noticed the setup earlier. 3 days before the rehearsal dinner, my mom casually asked if I still used the same card for family emergencies. At the time, I barely even processed the question. I just said yes. Big mistake. The night of the dinner, I arrived 20 minutes early wearing the only suit I owned that still fit properly. I even brought Qley and Derek a ridiculously overpriced bottle of champagne as a gift because despite everything, I genuinely wanted the night to go smoothly. That was my first mistake, thinking they cared whether I was there emotionally. The hostess led me toward the back half of the private room, nowhere near the main family table. I frowned slightly. I think there's a mistake." Before the hostess could answer, my mother swooped in smiling too brightly. "Oh no, honey, it's intentional." Then she laughed softly and added, "The main table is mostly adults and Derek's family. We needed to spread people out. Adults. I was 31 years old. I literally helped pay her mortgage. But apparently I wasn't adult enough for the main table." Meanwhile, Qley's 22-year-old unemployed friend Ashley was seated beside Derek's parents because she fit the aesthetic. I remember standing there for a second holding that champagne bottle while something ugly twisted in my chest. But I ignored it, like always. because causing conflict in my family automatically made you the villain. So I sat at the edge table beside teenage cousins scrolling TikTok and a sticky-fingered 8-year-old throwing breadsticks at people. Meanwhile, the real adults laughed together at the front table beneath glowing candlelight. And the entire dinner, nobody really spoke to me unless they needed something. Evan, can you move your chair? Evan, can you grab another drink tray? Evan, can you take a family photo? Not one person asked how I was doing. Not one. Then the bill came. One of the waiters approached carefully carrying a black folder. At first I assumed he was bringing separate checks. Instead, he walked directly toward me and placed it in front of me. I actually laughed a little because I genuinely thought it was a mistake. Then I opened it. $4,842.16. For a second, my brain literally stopped functioning. I looked up at the waiter. I think you've got the wrong person. The waiter immediately looked nervous. He glanced toward my mother before speaking. The reservation note stated you would be covering the rehearsal dinner, sir. The room suddenly felt too hot. Slowly, I turned toward my mom. And that's when I saw it. Not confusion, not surprise, expectation. Everyone at the main table suddenly became very interested in their drinks. Nobody spoke, because they already knew. Every single one of them already knew. And sitting there holding that bill in my hands, I finally understood something that should have been obvious years ago. They never saw me as family. They saw me as funding. The silence after the waiter explained the reservation note felt unreal. Like one of those nightmares where everybody in the room knows something terrible except you. I looked around slowly. My Uncle Gary suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. My aunt kept adjusting her napkin. Qley wouldn't even look at me directly because she was busy pretending to sip champagne. And my mother gave me that expression she always used whenever she wanted me to stop asking questions and quietly cooperate. That soft smile that wasn't really a smile. The don't embarrass me face. I stared at her for a few seconds before finally speaking. You told them I was paying? Mom's smile tightened immediately. Evan, she said softly like I was being difficult in front of strangers, we talked about helping with the wedding. No, I said carefully. You talked about me helping with small things. Qley let out this dramatic sigh and leaned back in her chair. Oh my God, are we seriously doing this right now? Doing this, like I was the problem. I actually laughed a little because the audacity of the situation was so ridiculous my brain couldn't process it normally. Doing what exactly? I asked. Finding out I was secretly assigned a $5,000 bill. It's not $5,000, Qley snapped immediately. The waiter awkwardly stood there still holding the receipt folder while 20 people pretended not to listen. I looked down again. It's literally $4,800, Qley. Well, excuse me for rounding. Something inside me cracked a little at that response. Not because of the money, because of how casual she sounded. Like secretly volunteering me to spend nearly $5,000 wasn't even worth discussing. Derek finally shifted uncomfortably beside her. Baby, maybe we should have mentioned it beforehand. The second he said that, Qley whipped her head toward him so fast I thought she might bite him. We did mention it, she insisted. No, I said immediately. You hinted, repeatedly. That's not the same thing. My mother suddenly lowered her voice into that manipulative fake calm parents use when they're trying to control a situation publicly. Evan, sweetheart, this is your sister's rehearsal dinner. Can we not create a scene? There it was, the family's favorite tactic. They provoke you privately, then label your reaction as the real problem. I could literally feel years of swallowed resentment crawling up my throat. The time Mom borrowed money for groceries, and I later found out she'd used it for Qley's spa weekend. The Christmas where I paid for everybody's gifts and still got mocked for bringing store-brand wine. The birthday dinner where Uncle Gary joked that I was basically the family sponsor. Everybody laughed, including me, because I thought laughing made it less humiliating. Now here I was again, still the joke. Except this time the punchline cost $4,842. I slowly closed the folder. You put my card information on the reservation. Mom avoided eye contact. That card was already saved from Thanksgiving catering. I blinked at her. You used my card without asking me? Oh, please, Qley interrupted loudly enough that nearby tables outside the private room started glancing over. Stop acting like we robbed you. You make more money than everybody here combined. And there it was, the real truth, not gratitude, not appreciation, entitlement. My success wasn't mine to them, it was community property. I looked around the table again, hoping, stupidly, that somebody would step in. Maybe my aunt, maybe Derek, maybe literally anyone. Nobody did. because this arrangement benefited everyone except me. Uncle Gary finally chuckled awkwardly and said, "Come on, kid, family takes care of family." Kid, I was paying half my mother's mortgage and still getting called kid. I looked directly at him. "Interesting," I said quietly, "because I don't remember family taking care of me." The table went silent again, and for the first time all night people actually looked uncomfortable. Mom immediately straightened in her chair. "Evan," that warning tone. The one that meant behave. Don't expose us. Don't ruin the image. But something inside me had already crossed a line. I looked toward the massive decorated head table where Qley sat surrounded by flowers, candles, and expensive champagne. Then I looked down at my spot beside the children's table. And suddenly, the entire night became crystal clear. They didn't even respect me enough to pretend I mattered before handing me the bill. That realization hurt more than the money ever could. I pushed the leather folder gently back toward the waiter. "I'm not paying this." The waiter froze. Mom's face immediately lost color. "Evan," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You wanted adults at the main table, remember?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. I stood up slowly from my chair. "Maybe the grown-ups should handle the bill too." You could have heard a fork drop. Chloe's jaw literally fell open. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely." Mom's fake calm finally shattered. "Sit down," she snapped under her breath, and suddenly I was 12 years old again, getting ordered around, expected to obey, expected to sacrifice quietly. Only this time I didn't. I grabbed my jacket from the back of my chair. The waiter looked terrified. Honestly, I felt bad for him more than anyone else in that room. Derek stood halfway like he wanted to intervene, but Qley grabbed his arm hard enough that he immediately sat back down. "Unbelievable," Qley muttered loudly. "You really want attention this badly?" I looked at her for a long moment, and honestly, that hurt. Because even now she genuinely believed she was the victim, not the woman who secretly volunteered her brother to pay thousands of dollars for a wedding event he wasn't even respected enough to sit properly at. Before leaving, I looked directly at my mother, and quietly said the sentence I think she hated most of all. "You should have asked." Then I walked out. Behind me, chaos exploded instantly, Qley yelling, Mom calling my name, chairs scraping. But for the first time in years, I kept walking anyway. And by the time I reached my car, my phone had already started blowing up. 27 missed calls, 14 texts. And every single message somehow blamed me for ruining the night they tried to manipulate me into funding. By the time I got home that night, I had 43 missed calls. 43. And somehow every voicemail sounded less concerned about me and more concerned about the restaurant bill. Not one person asked if I was okay. Not one person said, "Hey, that was messed up." Instead it was, "Call your mother back. You embarrassed Qley. Derek's family thinks we're trash now. Why would you do this during wedding week?" Like I had walked into the restaurant and randomly started flipping tables for fun. I sat on the edge of my couch in complete silence while my phone kept vibrating across the coffee table. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Finally I picked it up, not to answer, to read the messages. And honestly, that was my second breaking point. Because seeing everything written out made me realize how insane the entire family dynamic actually was. "Mom, you made me cry in front of everyone." Qley, "You always have to ruin things when attention isn't on you." Uncle Gary, "Real men take care of family." Aunt Lisa, "You know your mother can't afford this humiliation." Not one single message acknowledged what they did. Not one. I leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling while something ugly settled in my chest. Exhaustion, not anger anymore, not even sadness, just pure emotional exhaustion. Because suddenly I could see my entire life clearly for the first time. Every holiday I paid for, every emergency, every temporary loan that mysteriously became permanent. Every time they praised me only after I opened my wallet. I started thinking about my 29th birthday. Mom forgot to call until almost midnight. But 2 days later, she remembered immediately when her car battery died. Or the Christmas Qley bought Derek a $2,000 watch while still owing me money from rent I covered 6 months earlier. Or the fact that nobody in my family even knew the name of my company despite constantly benefiting from it. That realization hurt in a way I can't fully explain. Because when people only contact you for support long enough, eventually you stop feeling like a person. You start feeling like infrastructure, like an emotional utility bill. Useful, replaceable, expected. At around 1 in the morning, my phone rang again. "Mom," I stared at it for almost 10 seconds before answering. The second I picked up, she started crying. Not normal crying, performative crying. The kind designed to make you feel guilty before the conversation even starts. "How could you do this to us?" she whispered dramatically. I closed my eyes. "Do what?" "You humiliated your sister." "No," I said quietly. "You humiliated me." Silence. Then instantly, "So now we're the villains?" That sentence actually made me laugh a little, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. My family had this incredible ability to transform themselves into victims no matter what happened. I took a slow breath. "You used my card without permission. We were going to pay you back." That was such a ridiculous lie I didn't even respond immediately. Because if they were planning to pay me back, why hide it? Why not ask beforehand? Why act like I was ruining everything for questioning it? Exactly. Mom's voice hardened slightly when I stayed silent. "You know Qley's stressed. And I'm not. She's getting married, Evan." I rubbed my forehead. "No, Mom, she's throwing a luxury event she can't afford." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Her entire tone changed instantly. "You've always been jealous of your sister." I literally pulled the phone away from my ear for a second because I couldn't believe she'd actually said that. Jealous? Of Qley? The woman who treated accountability like a hate crime. I laughed quietly again. "Good night, Mom. Don't hang up on me." I ended the call. Then I sat there in silence for another minute before finally doing something I should have done years ago. I opened my banking app. And one by one, I started cutting the cords. The automatic transfer covering part of Mom's mortgage, gone. The streaming services under my account the family used, canceled. The emergency credit card Mom borrowed years earlier, frozen. The phone bill I still partially paid because Qley kept forgetting, removed. Every financial connection, every invisible leash, gone. And the scary part, it only took me 15 minutes. 15 minutes to realize how deeply entangled my entire family was in my finances. I sat there afterward staring at my screen with this strange mixture of guilt and relief twisting together inside me. Because part of me still felt cruel. That's what manipulation does to you. Even after being mistreated, you still feel guilty for protecting yourself. The next morning, chaos started. At 7:12 a.m., Mom called 6 times in a row. Then Qley, then Aunt Lisa, then even Derek. I ignored all of them. By 9 o'clock, the texts became aggressive. "Mom, the electricity payment declined." Qley, "Did you seriously cancel the family phone plan?" Uncle Gary, "This is childish." Childish. Interesting word considering they secretly shoved a $5,000 bill at me like organized criminals at an Italian restaurant. Around lunchtime, Derek finally texted something different. "Derek, hey man, I didn't know about the payment situation beforehand. Can we talk?" That message actually surprised me, because unlike everyone else, he sounded uncomfortable instead of angry. Still, I ignored it for the moment. I wasn't ready. I spent the entire day working remotely from my apartment trying to focus on client meetings while my phone continued detonating every few minutes. At one point, my mother actually sent, "If you loved this family at all, you'd fix this." And I remember staring at that message thinking, that's it right there. That's the whole relationship. Love to them was obedience with a credit limit. Nothing else. That evening, I finally contacted the restaurant directly. I explained calmly that my card had been placed on file without authorization for the rehearsal dinner. The manager sounded deeply uncomfortable. Apparently, my mother had confidently assured them beforehand, "My son always handles family events." That sentence hit me harder than it should have, because she said it so casually. Like my role in the family had already been decided permanently. The provider, the fixer, the wallet, not the son. The manager apologized and confirmed they'd removed my information completely pending payment resolution, which meant somebody else now had to deal with the bill. And judging from the furious texts arriving 30 minutes later, they had just found out. The first thing I noticed after cutting everyone off was how quiet my apartment suddenly felt. No constant buzzing, no guilt trips, no emergency requests disguised as quick favors. Just silence. And honestly, the silence felt wrong at first. That's the messed up thing about being raised as the family fixer. Chaos becomes normal. Stress becomes routine. Being needed becomes your entire identity. Without it, I almost felt empty. But underneath that emptiness, there was relief, real relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for another financial disaster to land in my lap. Unfortunately, my family wasn't nearly as peaceful about the situation. By the second day, the wedding cracks started showing publicly. Apparently, the rehearsal dinner bill had caused a massive fight behind the scenes because nobody actually had enough money to cover it, which honestly shouldn't have shocked me. These people had built an entire luxury wedding around assumptions and manipulation. Once I stopped cooperating, the whole thing started wobbling immediately. And Derek was finally beginning to notice. I found that out when he called me directly Thursday afternoon. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hey, I said cautiously. There was a long, awkward pause before he spoke. I owe you an apology. That surprised me enough to sit upright on my couch. Derek sounded exhausted, not angry, exhausted. I didn't realize how much you've been paying for, he admitted quietly. I rubbed my jaw. What do you mean? Another pause, then he laughed bitterly. Your mom accidentally mentioned you've been helping with the mortgage for years. Accidentally, sure, I leaned back slowly. And Qley told me you were just helping here and there. His voice tightened slightly. But apparently helping here and there means covering half the family's life. For the first time since the restaurant incident, I felt something close to validation. Not because Derek agreed with me, because somebody was finally seeing it, actually seeing it. I'm not trying to cause problems, I said carefully. I know, he interrupted immediately. That silence afterward felt heavy. Then Derek quietly asked the question nobody in my family had bothered asking yet. Are you okay? And somehow, that almost broke me more than the betrayal itself. Because I genuinely couldn't remember the last time someone in my family asked me that without needing something afterward. I laughed quietly under my breath. Honestly, I don't know. Derek exhaled slowly. Things are getting ugly over here. Apparently after the restaurant fiasco, Qley and my mother had spent 2 straight days scrambling for money. The venue still needed final payments. The florist needed deposits. The honeymoon suite balance hadn't even been paid yet. And worst of all, Derek had just discovered Qley volunteered ATM for additional costs without asking too. That made me sit up. She did what? She told the resort I'd upgrade us to the luxury honeymoon package. Oh, yeah, he muttered. Exactly. For the first time, I heard genuine doubt in his voice, not wedding stress, not frustration, doubt. Because once manipulative behavior becomes visible, it becomes impossible to fully unsee. And Qley had spent her entire life surrounded by people enabling her. Now suddenly somebody from outside, the family, was looking directly at the dysfunction. That terrified my mother. I found that out later that night. Because around 8:30 my apartment buzzer started going insane. Not ringing, buzzing repeatedly, aggressively. At first I thought maybe it was food delivery or a neighbor emergency. Then my phone exploded with texts from downstairs neighbors. Dude, is someone screaming for you outside? My stomach dropped instantly. I walked toward the window overlooking the street. And there she was. My mother. Standing outside my apartment building in heels and a beige trench coat, screaming my name into the night like a dramatic scene from a soap opera. I actually froze for a second from sheer disbelief. She spotted me at the window almost immediately, then started waving frantically. EVAN. People walking down the sidewalk had slowed down to stare. I felt humiliation crawl up my spine. Not because of me. Because I suddenly realized my mother genuinely believed public emotional pressure would force me to obey again. Like if she embarrassed me enough, I'd surrender. My phone rang again. Mom, I answered immediately. What are you doing? What am I doing? She snapped. What are you doing to this family? I looked down at her standing outside dramatically beneath the apartment lights while strangers openly watched. You need to leave. No, not until you fix this. Fix this. Again, always me fixing things. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, you're literally outside my apartment screaming. Because you won't answer anyone? I answered you for years. That shut her up for exactly 2 seconds. Then immediately, so now you hate your family? I closed my eyes. No, I said quietly. I'm just tired of being used by them. Her voice instantly became wounded. We have never used you. That sentence lit something inside me on fire, because the denial was almost insulting. I walked away from the window and spoke carefully. When's the last time you called me without needing something? Silence. Not defensive silence. Not angry silence. Blank silence, because she genuinely didn't have an answer. And honestly, neither did I. That realization hit both of us at the same time. I leaned against the kitchen counter while she breathed shakily into the phone. Finally, she whispered, You're really doing this before your sister's wedding? That question told me everything. Not, can we repair this? Not, how do we fix our relationship? Only, will you continue sacrificing yourself for the event? I looked out the window one last time. My mother suddenly looked smaller somehow. Not weak, just exposed. Like the performance had stopped working, and for the first time in my life I answered her honestly. The wedding was never the problem. Then I hung up. Down on the street, she stood there staring at her phone while the city moved around her. And for the first time ever, I didn't go downstairs to rescue her. The next 48 hours felt like watching a luxury cruise ship slowly realize it was taking on water. Everybody kept pretending things were fine. But underneath the surface, panic, pure panic. And the craziest part was how quickly the family turned on each other once my money disappeared from the equation. Apparently, when manipulation stops working, people suddenly have to face reality. And reality was expensive. I found out most of what happened through Derek, not because we became close or anything, but because by that point, I think he desperately needed somebody sane to talk to. He called me the night before the wedding sounding completely drained. I think I made a mistake. he said quietly the second I answered. No greeting, no small talk, just immediate regret. I sat down slowly at my kitchen table. What happened? Derek let out a long, exhausted breath. I found out Qley expected you to pay for part of the honeymoon. I blinked. What? Apparently she told the travel agency her brother usually handles surprise upgrades. I actually started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind that happens when your brain can't process how ridiculous something is anymore. Because at this point it honestly sounded like my family had built an entire financial strategy around emotionally cornering me. Derek sounded miserable. She acted like it was normal. That's because for her it is normal. Silence. Then he asked quietly, has it always been like this? And that question hit harder than I expected. Because once someone outside the family sees the dysfunction, you're forced to admit it exists too. I leaned back in my chair. Pretty much. Derek cursed softly under his breath. Apparently things had exploded earlier that afternoon when he refused the honeymoon upgrade charges. Qley immediately accused him of not caring about their future. Then my mother got involved, which somehow made everything worse. According to Derek, my mom actually suggested they could convince Evan to calm down after the wedding. Convince me to calm down. Like my feelings were a temporary tantrum, instead of years of resentment finally boiling over. That sentence apparently started the biggest fight of the entire engagement. Because for the first time, Derek openly asked why everybody seemed more concerned about accessing my wallet than repairing the relationship. Nobody had a good answer. So instead, they attacked him. Classic family strategy. The second someone points out the dysfunction, they become the enemy too. Qley apparently started crying immediately. Mom accused Derek of judging the family. Uncle Gary jumped in saying, family supports family financially. And Derek finally snapped. You mean Evan supports everybody financially? That silence afterward must have been brutal, because nobody could deny it anymore, not honestly. Not after years of me quietly covering half their lives. And once the illusion broke, everything else started collapsing too. The florist threatened cancellation unless final payments cleared. The wedding coordinator refused to release certain decorations without the remaining balance. Even the rehearsal dinner restaurant had apparently started calling repeatedly about unpaid charges, which meant somebody was finally experiencing consequences besides me, and they hated it. By Saturday morning, the actual wedding day, my phone was exploding again. Only this time the messages sounded desperate instead of angry. Mom, please don't abandon your sister today. Aunt Lisa, you'll regret this forever. Qley, if you ever loved me at all, prove it now. That last message sat on my screen for a long time, because it perfectly summarized our entire relationship. Love wasn't love to my family. Love was compliance, sacrifice, payment. If I truly loved them, I'd allow myself to be used quietly. Anything less made me selfish. I stared at Qley's message for almost a minute before finally locking my phone without answering. Then I went for a walk, and honestly, that walk changed something inside me. Because while my family was spiraling into chaos over a wedding built on appearances, I was walking through downtown drinking coffee in complete peace for the first time in years. No pressure, no emergencies, no emotional hostage situations, just quiet. I didn't realize how exhausted I'd been until the exhaustion finally stopped. Around noon, Derek called one final time. His voice sounded hollow. It's delayed. I stopped walking. What is the wedding? Apparently Qley locked herself in the bridal suite after another massive argument. This time about money again, because Derek had started questioning everything now. The honeymoon, the spending, the expectations, the manipulation, and Qley couldn't handle losing control of the narrative. She keeps saying you ruined this, Derek muttered bitterly. I looked across the street watching strangers move through their normal lives. No, I said quietly. I just stopped financing it. Another long silence. Then Derek laughed once, a tired, broken laugh. I think deep down she always believed you'd cave eventually. Honestly, so did I. That was the terrifying part. My entire life I always folded eventually. Out of guilt, out of obligation, out of fear of losing my family. But once you finally realize people only value your sacrifices, the sacrifices stop feeling noble. They start feeling tragic. Derek sighed heavily. I don't even know if this marriage should happen anymore. And for the first time since all this started, I genuinely felt sorry for him, because he wasn't just marrying Qley. He was marrying the entire system surrounding her. A system built on emotional pressure, entitlement, and manipulation disguised as family loyalty. I looked up at the cloudy afternoon sky and answered honestly. That's probably something you should figure out before saying vows. He didn't respond immediately. Then finally, yeah. That evening, while my family scrambled desperately to hold together the image of a perfect wedding, I sat alone in my apartment eating takeout noodles in complete silence. And somehow, it was the most peaceful family event I'd ever experienced. I didn't hear from anyone Sunday morning. No calls, no texts, nothing. After an entire week of non-stop chaos, the silence felt eerie. At first, I assumed everyone was still dealing with wedding fallout. Then around noon, Derek finally sent me a single message. It happened, but barely. I stared at the screen for a while before replying. You okay? The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I don't know. And honestly, that told me everything. Apparently, the wedding eventually happened almost 3 hours late after endless fighting behind closed doors. Guests waited awkwardly. Vendors argued about delayed payments. My mother apparently cried through half her makeup, and Qley walked down the aisle furious instead of happy. Because underneath all the flowers and expensive decorations, the fantasy had cracked. People had seen the truth, not all of it, but enough. Enough to make things uncomfortable. Enough to ruin the perfect image my family cared about more than actual relationships. I found out later through extended relatives that the reception felt tense the entire night. Derek barely smiled. Qley spent most of the evening complaining quietly to bridesmaids. My mother kept checking her phone like she expected me to suddenly appear and save everything emotionally at the last second. I never did. And that became the real turning point, because my family spent years believing they could always pressure me back into position eventually. But this time, I stayed gone. A week later, Mom finally came to my apartment again, thankfully without the public screaming performance. This time, she just stood outside my door looking older somehow, tired. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly said, "You've changed." And I remember almost laughing at that, because no, I hadn't changed. I had just stopped pretending the situation was normal. "I got tired," I answered. Mom looked down at the hallway floor. "You hurt your sister deeply." There it was again, still about Qley, still about everyone else, never about me. I leaned against the doorway. "You know what hurts?" I asked quietly. She looked up slowly. "Realizing your family only notices your value when you stop giving them things." Her eyes watered immediately, but this time I didn't feel guilty, because crying didn't erase years of behavior. And honestly, I think part of her knew that too. "She loves you," Mom whispered weakly. I shook my head. "No, she loves access to me." Mom flinched like I slapped her, but neither of us could pretend I was wrong anymore, not after the wedding disaster, not after the restaurant, not after years of invisible expectations finally dragged into the light. For a moment she just stood there silently, then very quietly she asked, "So what happens now?" And weirdly enough, I don't think she meant financially. I think for the first time in her life, she genuinely realized she might actually lose me, not temporarily, not emotionally manipulated into returning, actually lose me. I thought about that carefully before answering. Honestly, I don't know. And that was the truth, because boundaries feel terrifying when you've spent your whole life being punished for having them. Mom wiped at her eyes, then she said the sentence that finally confirmed everything for me. "We did the best we could. Not, 'I'm sorry.' Not, 'We hurt you.' Just justification, excuses, defense." I nodded slowly. "I know, and for the first time in my life, I truly stopped expecting her to become the mother I wanted. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. After she left, things changed permanently. The family group chat quietly disappeared. Nobody asked me for money anymore, not because they suddenly respected me, because they finally understood the answer would be no. And honestly, that changed everything. A few months later, I heard Derek and Qley were already in counseling. Apparently, financial arguments became a regular part of their marriage almost immediately, which wasn't surprising. You can't build healthy relationships on entitlement and emotional pressure forever. Eventually, reality shows up. As for me, I started therapy. That probably sounds anticlimactic compared to screaming wedding drama and family betrayal. But honestly, therapy was harder than all of it, because I had to confront something ugly. I spent most of my life believing love had to be earned through usefulness. That if I solved enough problems, paid enough bills, sacrificed enough pieces of myself, people would finally choose me willingly. But healthy love doesn't work like that. Healthy love doesn't keep score through suffering. And once I understood that, my entire life started changing. I traveled more, worked less. Started dating someone who actually asked about my day instead of my availability. And the strangest part, for the first time ever, peace stopped feeling unfamiliar. Sometimes I still think about that rehearsal dinner. That black leather bill folder sitting in front of me while everybody avoided eye contact. Back then, it felt like humiliation. Now, honestly, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because sometimes the moment that breaks your heart is also the moment that finally shows you the truth. And once you see the truth clearly enough, you stop volunteering to be destroyed by it.